Hello and welcome, my name is Chris from christopherhole.com. Welcome to this video where we're going to be working through the 3 steps to overcoming obesity and being overweight. And as a quick intro to my perspective on this subject, I tend to work with a lot of people who are carrying a bit of extra body fat. Some would be considered obese, some would be considered overweight, and some would just be wanting to lose body fat that they have. They're not necessarily overweight, they just want to lose the body weight that they've got. So from my perspective, I've worked in all the different sort of stages of body fat percentage, and I do tend to work with people that have maybe been told that they need to start an exercise program because they found out that they're obese, or they need to start like monitoring their diet because they're obese or they're overweight or something like that. So these are sort of or when we get to it, these are the 3 steps that I'm using to be able to sort of set them up with regards to managing their body fat percentage. And during this video, we're going to answer 3 quite simple questions. The first one is, what is it? Because one thing that we do want to do is make sure we are or we know where we are and what we're working with. So we need to find out what is overweight and what is obesity and what's the difference between the two. Then it's, how does it happen? Once we understand how it happens, we can then, or we become conscious of how it happens, we can then start to plan on changing that and manoeuvring it into a new set of habits. And then the final question, which is where we'll be spending most of our time, is how can we overcome it? So how can we overcome obesity and being overweight? And that's where we're going to look at the 3 different steps that we need to take. Now, they aren't necessarily simple steps, but they are steps in themselves. They do take a bit of work and they do take a bit of planning. So what we'll do now is we'll get straight into answering the first question in what is being overweight and what is obesity. The first question we're going to look at in this video is, what is it? So what is obesity? What is being overweight? Now, you'll read slightly different readings on the internet depending on where you read, but as a general rule, obesity for a male is when their body fat percentage is 25% or over, and for females it's 35% or over. And being overweight is 20% or over, and for females it's 30% or over. Now, again, as I mentioned, that will be slightly different depending on where you look, but as a general rule, it sort of sits in that area. So now we know exactly what it is, we can understand how far into our obesity or how far into our overweightness we are. And that's all we really need to do. It's just like, right, okay, so there I am. That's where I sit within all of this obesity and being overweight. The next question is, how did that happen? Well, obviously, we know it's probably because we've eaten too much of the wrong thing, we've maybe not done enough exercise. So it happens over a long period of time of doing those 2 things. But more importantly, it's also, which kind of goes under the radar for a lot of people, it's how we think about food and the emotional parts of food. So a lot of the way we eat in the Western world is sort of, it's culture, it's tradition, it's celebrations, but there's also, we might emotionally eat because we're bored, and there's all these different sort of moods and situations where we'll be eating, and it doesn't necessarily align with sort of the health that we want, if you will. So we know where it is, we know what obesity is, we know what being overweight is, we know, or we have a better idea of how it happens. It's because we're eating too much of the wrong thing, we're not moving enough, and we've potentially got some certain moods that make us, or certain scenarios or certain experiences that make us eat certain ways. That may be too much or too little or whatever it might be. And it's happening over a long period of time. It's not happening within a week. We're not 15% body fat and then a week later we're 30% body fat. It's happened over a long period of time. But what it's done is it's gone under the radar, and then all of a sudden we're starting to look at ourselves and go, hang on a minute, I'm too heavy, or I'm carrying too much body fat, or a doctor's told us you need to do something about your body fat because it's going to put pressure on your heart and you're going to get a heart disease or a more serious illness. So that leads us now into the third question, which is how we overcome it, which is where we're going to spend a bit more of our time. So obviously we've done the first bit, which is where do we sit within it? So what is obesity and where do we sit within it? Are we a male and are we 40% body fat? So we're quite a long way into being obese. So we've got a bit further to come back. Or are we 21% and we're just slightly overweight and we just need to lose a couple of percent? So the first thing is knowing that and bringing context to that. So we need to know what work is in front of us. Do we have a lot of work in front of us, or do we have a little bit of work in front of us? And what then comes from that is the second point, which is then we set a goal. So if we know we're 40% and we might want to get down to 20%, so we need to lose half of that body fat that we're carrying. Or it might be that we're 23% and we want to lose 4% and get down to 19% and sort of sit within the acceptable ranges, if you will. So once we know where we are, once we know the goal that we're setting, all that we've got to now do is build the plan that goes in place to be able to fulfill that goal that we want. Now with a plan, the main thing that we need to understand is that it needs to be flexible. Because when we take a car journey, we know we want to go from the city that we're in to the city that our cousins are in, because we're going to go and visit them. We know that there's a one road that we could go down, but what if there's a roadblock and there's some roadworks that's happening? We might need to turn off of that road, go down another road, and then turn back onto the main road and then carry on. So we need to have a flexible plan in place that sort of is able to take any sort of diversions, if you will. So we might fall off the wagon for a couple of days for whatever reason, and then we just come back on the wagon, if you know what I mean. So the plan needs to be flexible enough to be able to manage all of that. So in order to start building the flexible plan and to be able to achieve certain goals, we might not go straight into, right, week 1, I am going to lose 1% body fat, or I'm going to lose a kilo in weight, or whatever it might be. Because again, we need to further investigate what led us there. So what we're going to start doing is we're going to start by monitoring the food and drink that we take in. So it's things like, it's knowing your calories. So first of all, know what calories you need to take to be able to survive, and know what calories you are taking. So are you eating too much? Are you eating too little? How is it sitting? What types of foods are you eating? So are you eating sort of very processed foods? Are you eating foods that are high in sugar or high in trans fatty acids? What types of fluids are you taking in? Are you drinking lots of caffeine, tea, soft drinks, and alcohol? And are you not drinking much water? So it's these types of questions. So for week 1, it might just be, or week 2 and 3, it depends how long it takes. You might just monitor the foods that you're taking in. And then what you might do is then move on to just monitoring your exercise and activity. So there's all these devices now that you can monitor your steps. So that's a really good way of monitoring your activity. Once you've got a grasp of that, you might, if you're already doing exercise, you might just monitor the exercise that you're doing. So you're spending 3 times a week for 1 hour doing exercise, and you're taking 10,000 steps. So we're starting to move in the direction of the amount of exercise that we need to be doing. But you might not be there yet. So you might need to find out, well, where are you in order to get there? So it's monitoring your food and drink, it's monitoring your exercise and activity, but also monitor your moods. So what moods make you eat what foods? What times of day are you eating certain types of foods? What situations are you in where you drink slightly more alcohol, more coffee, or more tea? What moods are you in when you're trying to drink more water? Is it a chore to drink more water? So it's thinking about all of these scenarios, and that might take the first 2 or 3 weeks to actually complete. But what it's doing is it's building a picture of where you are. So we understood what body fat you were, but how did we get there? And it's once we build that picture, we can then start unpicking it. And that's where the final bit comes in, is then slowly take action and just one step at a time. So don't try and change your whole diet. Don't try and build in a 5 days a week exercise program. Don't try and overhaul your your mental relationship with food. Just take it one bit at a time. Change one bit of food at a time. Change just increasing the amount of water that you take in one bit at a time. And then what that needs is, as you start changing it one bit at a time, it then needs repetition. Just keep repeating it, keep repeating it. You're going to not want to do it, but keep repeating it, keep repeating it, keep repeating it. What that builds is familiarity. What familiarity builds is, that's the beginnings of the habit to be formed. And then the final thing is just to be patient, because that can be a lot. Now, obviously, depending on how far in you are, might mean doing a lot more of this. It might mean doing all of what I've talked about. But if you're not far from it, if you're only, a couple of percent over, but you want to get down, it might not be doing everything that I've talked about. Some things may resonate with you than others. So it's starting on those. And as you work through and start building, you then keep monitoring and testing. Well, okay, am I losing weight? Yes, I am. Okay, I continue. So it's doing all of these little steps and then just building and building and building this new lifestyle. So hopefully this has been helpful. Hopefully you're able to digest some of the information. Come back to this video and re-listen to it, because in 3 months' time, once you've started doing something, you might pick up something completely different within the video. So hopefully it's been helpful. Please do take away from this something and put it into action as quickly as possible, and then come back, put something else into action, come back, put something else into action, and just work over time to be able to build this new lifestyle, if you will, this more healthier lifestyle. So many thanks for watching. My name is Chris from ChristopherHole.com. Please like, share and comment on the video. Please come to the website, ChristopherHole.com. Please join the newsletter at ChristopherHole.com/join, or join me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. I'd be more than happy to answer any of your questions, and I look forward to hearing from you in the future. So my name is Chris from ChristopherHole.com. I'll speak to you in a future video.